Hello and welcome to IST254. This is Chapter 1 in your book, Windows Server Overview. We're going to introduce servers to you, talk about understanding the different roles that servers play, and then we're going to talk about the Microsoft Server features. Just remember that servers do play a very vital role in businesses today. We hardly have any businesses that don't have some sort of computers and servers and then client computers within the business that depends on the server for information. Some of the times it just could be as simple as email and file storage, but could also be more complex and include collaboration and security. So we're going to talk about servers in general, but mainly we're going to focus on Windows servers. So you need to know the differences between servers and clients and then the different designs of server hardware. Okay, so the big three divisions of services are network services, security services, and information services. Network services can include anything that exists to provide network functionality, for example, DHCP or DNS. Now, DHCP is used to provide IP configuration settings that allow clients to communicate over the network. The main thing that DHCP does is provide IP addresses to your client computers. DNS is the domain name system, and it resolves internet or just resolves friendly names to IP addresses. Whenever you open up a browser and you type in, just an easy to remember name, and then your computer will change that into an IP address. And it's all done behind the scenes. You don't really have to do anything. It's done pretty fast too. It's pretty amazing. Okay, security services include services that include authentication, authorization, and confidentiality, or some sort of protection for your network and your devices on the network. An example of a security service is Active Directory Domain Service, and this can be partially cataloged as a network service. Here the user accounts are used to log on to the Windows server-based networks, and then when these accounts are used for logon processes, they have to authenticate. So what they actually do is the username and password is transmitted to the server, and the server checks the username and password against what it has in its directory to see if it matches, and if it does, then you're able to log on to the computer. Also, another security service is IPsec, which will enforce security settings for IP-based communications. Information services include any service that provides information access, information management, or information processing. Good example of that would be SQL Server, which provides database access and database management. Applications are broken into two different components. They are client and server. This term became very popular back in the 80s because it indicates that the application is broken into two components. A client component is a computing device or an application that consumes services, and then the server, of course, is providing those services. This is just showing you a diagram of a client-server configuration. But it's not enough to say that the server does part of the processing and the client does another part of the processing. In most client-server systems, a single server can service many different clients, and they can all be different types of computers. As you see in this diagram, we have PCs and Macs and laptops. The one thing they didn't show us was wireless networks. Also, there's different operating systems within servers. There's Server 2000, Server 2003, Server 2008, and Server 2003 and 2008 also has an R2 version. And then in clients, there's XP, Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8, and I read just today that Windows 9 is coming out really, really soon. That's pretty fast for Microsoft, but apparently it's because they need to correct some of the problems that they had with Windows 8. I didn't really read the whole article. But also, your Mac or your Apple computers can easily be integrated into a Windows directory and network services nowadays. Okay, there you need to know the difference in a logical and a dedicated server. Logical simply means that the device is intended as one thing but performs the logic of another. You can have a client computer that's intended to be a workstation for a user, but if it shares a printer to other users or if it shares files to other users, then it can be considered to be serving those things. Um, but it's a logical server. It's not equipped or built to be a full server. A server operating system is optimized to provide file sharing functions and can overcome connection limits that client operating systems have. Whether you realize it or not, a Windows workstation operating system can only allow 10 concurrent connections at one time. That is a limitation that's written into the operating system itself by Microsoft to keep us from using our workstation operating systems as servers. So a server service that couldn't run on a client machine would be something like file and printer sharing. You can you understand that if this is allowed by networking policies, then you could actually share a printer. It again, it's not as easy. I mean, you could share small programs even from workstation to workstation, but it's just not the optimal way to do it. There's different server hardware, and you need to be aware of the different types of server hardware. Um, the different types or shapes are called form factors. And as you can see here, we're looking at desktop, rack mount, and blade servers. Desktop sometimes can't, it's sometimes hard to distinguish a desktop server from a workstation. If you want to test your ability to tell the difference, go up to the front of the room when we're in class and look at those computers that have their backs to you and see if you can tell which ones are workstations and which ones are servers. The rack mount servers are specifically designed to mount into a rack or a cabinet, and they will have doors in the front and they have special ventilation and cooling. Um, but basically the servers are just stacked one on top of the other and attached to the rack, not just sitting just one on top of the other, and they usually use a shared UPS. The blade server is actually a removable blade that sits into a type of docking station. If you look at the picture on the bottom, all of those, like there's 4 or 5 or 6 blades in that device in the bottom, but you also see that there's space for more blades that can be put in it. So it depends on, in one term, it depends on how much money you've got to spend. In another term, it depends on which form factor actually works the best for your business. Server roles are a collection of responsibilities that are provided to the network or network devices by a specific server. Roles are a collection of software programs and they're based on role services. But you don't want to confuse features with roles. Features are um, pieces of, or I'm sorry, components of a role. So you could have a role and then add more features to that role. So here's an example. You can have file and share management role, distributed file system role, file server resource manager, services for network file systems, Windows search service, Windows Server 2003 file services that you might need to deploy or employ for backwards compatibility, and also branch cache for network files. So all of these are under the file services role. An application server provides an integrated environment for applications like COM+, message queuing, web services, and distributed transaction. COM+ allows for remote invocation of applications. Message queuing allows for asymmetric network communications, which means that a request can come to an application and be processed when the application has time and resources to do so, and it will not do like instant processing. Web services can allow your application to communicate using HTTP, which is the common web-based communication protocol. And then you can have distributed transactions that allow for applications to complete transactions against multiple databases stored on multiple computers that participate in the network. When you're providing internet access and collaboration, you've got to remember that internet access is provided through special servers, not always proxy servers, but we do have proxy servers and also network address translation that can actually help you with when you have expended all your IP addresses and you still need to get out to the network. And then there's also IIS, or Internet Information Services, and this is the foundation for a good many collaborative applications. Web servers are the most common types of servers that are used in modern networks, and they're used to provide content to client computers and applications. We also have not only HTTP, but HTTPS, which is encrypted and secured when we're doing interactions with servers that we want to be sure our transactions are absolutely secure. So with a web server, you can provide a lot of services which can include just information to the internet users through your public website, allow for uploading and downloading files through either HTTP or FTP, and host servers that contain business logic, and then implement collaboration servers such as Microsoft SharePoint server. In former versions of server, file and print services were all one single role, but nowadays it's been divided up. The file services role provides features such as share management, storage management, file replication, search services. Also, there's some other tools called File Server Resource Manager, which can provide management of file quotas, file screening. File screening means that you're restricting what types of files that you're going to allow your clients to put on your server. And you can also generate storage reports. You can do file management tasks such as searching for files on the server, and also you can manage remote storage resources. Excuse me. The print and document services role will allow you to share printers and scanners on your network. But this is good because you can centralize both your printer and scanner management through one role. The management tools are called the Print Management Console and the Scan Management Console. And you can also install these tools on Windows 7 clients so that administrators can run them from a workstation instead of going to the server directly to run them. Now let's talk about remote access for your users. Nowadays, many people need remote access to computers so that they can do their work. So we're going to talk about network address translation, IEEE 8021X authentication, radius server